She walked behind her mother's coffin for 6 hours without shedding a single tear in public. She stayed on duty the very next morning. She has given more years, more events, and more quiet sacrifice to the British crown than almost any living royal. And yet, when Queen Elizabeth II died on September 8, 2022, reports began to emerge suggesting that Princess Anne, the only daughter of the most powerful woman in the world, may have received nothing from her mother's estate. Not a pound, not a property. While the actual contents of the Queen's will remain locked in a sealed vault somewhere in London, shielded from the world for the next 90 years, what has slowly come to light about royal inheritance law, the structure of the monarchy's finances, and Anne's quietly turbulent position within a changing royal family paints a picture far more complicated and far more human than the palace would ever officially admit. To understand why Princess Anne's story matters so deeply right now, you have to go back to the beginning, not just to September 2022 when her mother died, but all the way to August 15, 1950, when Anne Elizabeth Alice Louise was born at Clarence House in London. She was the second child of then Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. At the time of her birth, she was third in the line of succession to the British throne. Third. That position, that promise of proximity to power, would quietly be eroded over the coming decades in ways that nobody in 1950 could have anticipated, and it would shape everything about who Princess Anne became. In 1952, her mother ascended to the throne as Queen Elizabeth II, making 2-year-old and the daughter of the most powerful monarch in the world. But the rules governing the British royal family are ancient, and they are not always kind. The law that governed succession at the time was called male preference primogeniture, a centuries-old doctrine that said, in plain terms, that a son outranks a daughter regardless of age. When Anne's younger brother Andrew was born in 1960, he leapfrogged over her in the line of succession. When Edward was born in 1964, he did the same. By the time Anne was a teenager, she had already been quietly moved back in line by 2 younger brothers, both of whom had done nothing more remarkable than being born male. The irony of this displacement would only grow with time. Over the decades that followed, Princess Anne would become, by almost every measurable standard, the hardest-working royal in the entire institution. She carried out more than 400 public engagements in a typical year. She represented the crown in countries that most members of the public could not point to on a map. She attended investiture ceremonies, presided over charitable events, traveled with relentless energy, and did it all with a discipline that was almost military in its consistency. Meanwhile, the brothers who had overtaken her in the line of succession, Andrew and Edward, never came close to matching her output or her public approval ratings. When the Succession to the Crown Act was finally updated in 2013, it ended the practice of male preference primogeniture, but only for royals born on or after October 28, 2011. The change came too late for Anne. She remained displaced, locked into a position further down the line than her birth order deserved, and the law that had passed her over was simply allowed to stand. Princess Charlotte, William and Catherine's daughter, became the first British princess to retain her place in the succession upon the birth of a younger brother. Anne never got that protection. As one historian noted, Anne had spent decades watching 2 brothers overtake her, brothers who, in terms of public service, recognition, and consistent duty, never reached her level. Then came September 8, 2022. Queen Elizabeth II died at Balmoral Castle in Scotland at the age of 96. It was the end of the longest reign in British history. And in the immediate hours that followed, the woman who arguably had the most complex personal and professional relationship with the late Queen took charge without hesitation. Princess Anne accompanied her mother's coffin on the long, 6-hour drive from Balmoral to Edinburgh. She stood vigil. She walked behind the coffin in London. She was the only female member of the royal family to walk in the procession behind her mother's casket to Westminster Hall. And the morning after the state funeral, while the rest of the world was still absorbing the grief of the moment, she was back at work. But behind the composed exterior, a deeply uncomfortable reality was beginning to emerge about what Queen Elizabeth's death would mean for Princess Anne financially. Royal wills in Britain have been sealed from public inspection since 1910, when the will of Prince Francis of Teck was quietly locked away to prevent embarrassment to the crown. Since then, more than 30 royal wills have been stored in a safe at an undisclosed location in London, under the care of a senior High Court judge. Not one of those wills has ever been made public. When Prince Philip died in April 2021, Judge Andrew McFarlane, the president of the High Court's Family Division, ruled that Philip's will would be sealed and kept private for a minimum of 90 years. His reasoning was formal but revealing. Publication, he wrote, would be very extensive and wholly contrary to the aim of maintaining the dignity of the sovereign. Queen Elizabeth's own will follow the same path. By convention, the executor applied to the High Court, the judge agreed, and the document was sealed. It now sits alongside Philip's in that safe, alongside the sealed wills of the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret. No one outside a very tight circle of legal professionals and palace insiders will know what it says for at least 9 decades. The contents, who received what, which properties were mentioned, which personal items went where, and whether Anne received anything at all, are shielded entirely from public view. What has emerged, however, is not from the will itself, but from a detailed understanding of how royal inheritance actually works. And that picture, once examined closely, raises serious questions about what Princess Anne may have received from her mother's personal estate. According to reporting in the Daily Express and subsequently analyzed by multiple royal finance experts, the entirety of Queen Elizabeth's personal fortune, estimated at around £370 million, encompassing jewelry, art, investments, and private properties including the beloved Balmoral Castle and Sandringham House, is believed to have passed directly and entirely to King Charles III, not divided among the children, not split between Anne, Andrew, and Edward. Passed in full to Charles alone. The reason for this is not cruelty. It is tax law, and it is a strategy that dates back to a deal struck between the monarchy and the British government in 1993. Under that arrangement, assets transferred from one sovereign to the next are entirely exempt from inheritance tax. In Britain, inheritance tax is applied at 40% on estates above a certain threshold. For a fortune estimated at £370 million, the tax liability on any portion distributed to non-sovereign heirs could run into the tens of millions of pounds. By directing the entire personal estate to Charles, the monarchy avoided that liability. A similar approach was used when the Queen Mother died in 2002 and left her estate largely to Queen Elizabeth for the same reason. This is not illegal. It is not even unusual within the context of how the British monarchy has managed its finances for over a century. But the human reality of it, when placed beside the life Princess Anne has actually lived, is genuinely striking. Anne has been described by royal observers as perhaps the most committed working royal of her generation, a woman who carried out 217 public engagements in 2024 alone, ranking first among all working royals for the 4th consecutive year. That same year, she did so despite suffering a concussion in June after being struck by a horse at her Gatcombe Park estate, requiring hospitalization. She was back at work shortly after her discharge. When King Charles III announced his cancer diagnosis in early 2024, it was Anne who quietly stepped in to absorb additional responsibilities, doing more investiture ceremonies, more regional visits, more of the day-to-day work that holds the monarchy's public image together. And yet the reports suggest the financial structure of the institution she has served so faithfully ensured that when the accounting was done, she may have received nothing from her mother's private estate. That dynamic, maximum service, minimum inheritance has quietly captured public attention in a way that the palace has never directly addressed. Anne, for her part, has never spoken about the will publicly, and almost certainly never will. Her character does not allow for that kind of personal disclosure. She has said herself in one of her rare candid interviews that she sees no room for retirement in her life. "It really isn't written in," she told a journalist. "It isn't really an option." What makes the broader picture even more layered is the set of tensions that have quietly gathered within the royal family in the years since the Queen's death. On multiple fronts, Anne has found herself at odds with the direction the institution is moving. Reports emerged in 2025 that she is annoyed with Prince William, her nephew, and the future king, for not taking on enough of the routine ceremonial work that keeps the monarchy functioning. According to sources cited in the Times, Anne would like William to carry out more investiture ceremonies at Windsor Castle, particularly given that he lives nearby at Adelaide Cottage. A source described as close to the Princess Royal put it plainly, "She's still doing most of the investitures at Windsor even though William lives there." William's public engagement numbers in 2024 ranked 8th among working royals. Anne ranked first, despite being 74 years old, and having spent the summer recovering from a head injury. Then there is the matter of Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, the daughters of Prince Andrew, whose public disgrace following the Jeffrey Epstein scandal has cast a shadow over the entire royal family. Reports in June 2026 indicated that Anne had taken a firm stand in their defense, reportedly at war with factions of the royal family who wanted to distance the institution from Andrew's daughters entirely. According to insiders, Anne believes Beatrice and Eugenie have conducted themselves with dignity, avoided creating scandal, and should not be punished for circumstances entirely outside their control. One source described her position with particular force. There is a real sense of injustice about the way the sisters are being basically frozen out. Anne, it was said, is not someone who backs down easily. She has also maintained a notably independent relationship with her disgraced brother Andrew himself. Even as Charles stripped Andrew of his royal titles, and later moved to remove him from Royal Lodge, the large Windsor estate where Andrew had lived rent-free for years, Anne apparently continued to maintain quiet contact. A royal expert writing for the Daily Mail noted that Anne's approach to the Andrew crisis had been notably independent-minded. On Christmas Day, when the rest of the family gathered at Sandringham and Andrew was excluded, Anne reportedly telephoned him. She was not endorsing what he had been accused of. She was, by most accounts, doing what she has always done, trying to hold something together that others were content to let fall apart. These tensions, with William over duty, with palace factions over Beatrice and Eugenie, with the institution's direction more broadly, are not the kind of battles that will ever be fought in public. Anne is not Harry. She will not give interviews to American television networks or write books about palace dysfunction. But the picture that has assembled itself from these various reported threads is of a woman who has given everything to an institution, received something considerably less than everything in return, and is watching a new generation reshape that institution in ways she does not always agree with. The question of what Queen Elizabeth's will actually contain, beyond the broad financial logic that has been publicly analyzed, will remain unanswered for the foreseeable future. The sealed vault holds those answers, and it will not open in any of our lifetimes. But the facts that are visible do not require the will's contents to tell their own complicated story. A woman displaced in the line of succession by ancient gender laws. A daughter who outworked every sibling for decades. A royal whose public approval sits among the highest of any working member of the family. A woman who may have inherited nothing from a £370 million estate, not because she was unloved, but because an institution that is centuries old still operates on rules that were never designed with fairness as their guiding principle. Princess Anne has never asked for sympathy. Her entire public identity is built around the rejection of that kind of sentiment. When she was asked years ago whether her children might have been better off with royal titles, she said yes. That life was probably easier without them. When her brother ascended to the throne and the world expected her to become more prominent, she simply continued doing what she had always done. When her mother died and the nation grieved, she walked behind the coffin and then flew to Glasgow the next morning to meet city officials and inspect floral tributes. That is who she is. That is what she has always been. But history has a way of reassessing those who were overlooked while they were alive, and there is a growing sense among royal observers that Princess Anne's story, the displacement, the decades of unmatched service, the sealed will, the quietly simmering tensions within a changing family, is one that the British public is only beginning to truly reckon with. Somewhere in an undisclosed location in London, in a safe under the care of a high court judge, a document sits sealed. It will not be opened for 90 years. By then, everyone involved will be gone. But the questions it has already raised, about fairness, about service, about what a lifetime of duty is actually worth to the institution that demands it, those questions are very much alive right now.